When a single compromised node is introduced to a complex network, the resulting cascade can collapse the entire system in seconds. Most conversations about government survival ignore this mechanics-level reality. Instead, they focus almost entirely on who is in charge, the personnel, the ideology, or the current political party. But evaluating leadership is the wrong metric for institutional stability. Malicious operators are not anomalies that can simply be voted away. In any complex, large-scale system, bad actors are constant, inevitable variables. To survive them, governance cannot be treated as a political debate. It has to be approached strictly as an engineering challenge. In systems engineering, surviving inevitable failure requires a fault-tolerant architecture. This is a design built to continue operating correctly even when individual components fail or turn actively malicious. Applied to a state, survival relies on 8 specific structural requirements. These operate completely independent of the virtue of the people in power. If a government is missing even one of these architectural requirements, it introduces a predictable, mathematically certain vulnerability. Engineering a trustless, structurally sound system is the only way a government survives the inevitable introduction of malicious human actors. Let's build this architecture from the ground up. This diagram maps the state. A central hub rests on bedrock principles, connected to peripheral public infrastructure. Requirement 1 is continuous, verifiable proof of operation. Notice the unbroken data stream looping, confirming the system is actively functioning. This is the exact opposite of the traditional model, which relies on periodic checks, like annual reports or 4-year election cycles, to verify the system is still working. The gaps between those periodic checks create massive dark windows. A government can be silently captured within these blind spots, with no alarm triggering until the next scheduled review. To stop that, requirement 3, continuous verification. An automated diagnostic signal constantly compares the central hub's current status directly against original foundation principles. Without this constant measurement, the state is vulnerable to slow drift. Incremental departures from founding norms accumulate over time. Each step is too small to trigger a response, but the cumulative result is total deviation from the original design. Next is requirement 2, shared fate. The structural supports of the enforcement class must rest entirely upon the public infrastructure ring. If the enforcement mechanism is insulated, it can easily survive the collapse of the very infrastructure it is supposed to protect. When operators are immune to the consequences of their actions, they have zero structural incentive to prevent the degradation of public systems. Continuous telemetry and inextricably linked survival parameters are the only way to prevent the incremental, unnoticed decay of the state. Look inside the central hub, made of multiple independent institutional nodes. We map what happens when one is breached. Requirement 6 demands institutional capture produces visible signals automatically. If a node is compromised, bold warning pathways instantly cross into all adjacent independent nodes. Without this cross-communication, an institution fails silently. The evidence of its capture remains locked within its own boundaries, and the public only finds out when the damage is irreversible. This triggers requirement 4. Detection by one branch must initiate an unsuppressible response across all others. The corrupted node is physically unable to block the outward flow of the warning signal. If discovery is localized instead, a corrupted branch will simply bury its own violations internally. This allows bad actors to execute sequential capture. They compromise the state one invisible branch at a time, moving unchecked because the wider system is completely blind to the local infection. Distributed automatic visibility ensures that a single institutional failure acts as a blaring alarm across the entire network, rather than a fatal, silent cancer. Between these institutional nodes are strict security barriers. These maintain separation and balance. In network security, a single point of failure is a localized vulnerability that can bring down the entire system. In politics, a check on power functions the exact same way if it can be unilaterally removed. Requirement 5 states no single actor or branch can remove a check on power. The system rejects unilateral attacks, requiring multi-key authorization from distant, unconnected nodes. Dismantling any protection must mandate coordination across multiple independent trust boundaries. Crucially, these independent boundaries must be engineered so they have absolutely no structural incentive to cooperate on the removal of that protection. If a check on power only exists until one powerful actor decides to remove it, it is not a structural protection at all. It is merely a temporary illusion of security. When a live constitutional violation occurs within the system, it initiates a strict race against time. There is a severe speed mismatch between a rapidly expanding threat and a slow, sequential human deliberation process. The window of time a committee uses to evaluate a breach is a highly exploitable vulnerability. The violator operates and expands freely while the defenders deliberate. This is why Requirement 8 is necessary. Responses to constitutional violations must be pre-committed, hardwired, and automatic. A breach instantly triggers a structural lockdown that severs the compromised connection. Removing the human evaluation gate stops the violator, preventing them from leveraging the deliberation period to cause exponential damage. Finally, Requirement 7. The system must naturally integrate new protections. New modules plug in seamlessly, allowing the network to continue operating without interruption. If adding a new protection requires shutting down the government or securing supermajority consensus from a central authority, the system becomes rigid. Forcing overwhelming agreement means the state's defenses will perpetually lag behind the current threat curve. Automated defense triggers combined with modular upgradability allow a system to survive real-time attacks while remaining agile enough to evolve against future threats. Here is the final, fully engineered state architecture operating under pressure. It is continuously pinging, mutually verified, distributing alerts across boundaries, and instantly blocking localized threats. We built this on 4 structural pillars: continuous telemetry, distributed visibility, immutable checks, and automated response. Systems do not collapse because bad people exist. They collapse because the architecture lacks the specific properties required to neutralize them. This diagram lists all 8 structural requirements required for a state's survival. This is a practical diagnostic. Measure your current government against this specific matrix. Count exactly how many of these structural properties are actually satisfied by the architecture you live under. Then, look at the missing structural elements and map them directly to the exploits we just discussed. The vulnerabilities caused by these missing properties are not theoretical. They are the exact exploits being successfully leveraged against your governance system right now.